live studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, it's Michael here from the Oilerslive Podcast, coming to you live. This time it is Oilers Live doing this, and I've got my first guest for Tuesday's 6 p.m. slot, 6 p.m. MST, Mountain Standard. I've got Josh Boulton. He's from the, he's the man behind ToughCall Pod. So first things first, if you're not already following him, I want you to go to Twitter and just type in ToughCall Pod and give him a follow. I have enjoyed the content you've put out, and enough so that I thought I'd ask you on the air. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so awesome stuff that we got a chance to finally chat and do something live here and talk some hockey, and we've got lots of different things happening. First things first, I want to talk about ToughCall Pod because I've been following you for a little while now. You put out tons of content. You're obviously right into what's going on the ice in terms of officiating, player safety, that type of thing. Give us kind of a little bit of a background about the ToughCall Podcast.
It's a little bit more frustrating now when I go on the serious side of things. It started off as a little fun thing when Zdeno Chara turnbuckled Max Pacioretty. A lot of my friends had some things to say about that, and we got into some great banter about whether it was dirty, whether it was intentional. And I thought, well, we have opinions, and let's find out if someone else has an opinion. I just put it out there into the universe, and basically just to have them say whether they thought I was right or my friends were right, that sort of thing. And as I got more and more into the development side of hockey, I'm heavy into minor hockey. I coach a lot, and I'm the development coordinator for our minor hockey association. And I actually am a certified checking clinic instructor for Hockey Nova Scotia under the Hockey Canada model. And some of the things I saw on the ice that players do all the time are just ridiculous, especially at the NHL level. And what I say to a lot of people is, they say they're hockey fans, but really they're just NHL hockey fans. And if they watch any other hockey, you start to see that that's not allowed, especially at minor hockey. We're teaching kids not to do a lot of this stuff and to control their emotions and be better people. And then at the NHL level, it's all bets are off. So I feel like with all the concussions and a lot of the problems that they're having, it's so easy to solve. And it seems like almost like they just don't want to now. That's the point where I'm at. So ToughCall Pod is just a documentation of that. What I see, what I would do about it, and just trying to get enough people on board to start finally pressuring the NHL to be a little better, a little more consistent at it. That's basically my whole mission.
Yeah, and so along with that mission, you've got another Twitter account that you've set up, which you're basically, in essence, you're saying if I was the director of player safety or head of player safety, this would be my calls. What's the name of that one? It's at NHL Calls, is it?
I just started that this year. It's at NHL Call, and the reason I started that is because I started a YouTube channel this year, where I actually made my own Department of Player Safety videos, where I say like, this is the incident. I have a podcast that's audio only, and if you don't know the clip I'm talking about, it's difficult to understand what I'm saying, and it's just easier to explain it with a video. But I never really, I didn't want to put the work in, to be honest. But now it's worth it to me to put the work in. So I've started. I mean, I'm not technologically advanced or anything, but I figured out how to make a video and do some things to it. So it's been a lot of fun that way to grow as a person learning the technology. And of course, I'm putting out these videos. And the difference that I do want to make clear is in my videos, my system isn't based on what I think the NHL Department of Player Safety is going to do. I'm not trying to predict what they're doing. I'm not even actually saying what they should do. I'm saying what I would do if I was in charge. So a lot of my suspensions or punishments are significantly more than the NHL probably should do based on their current standard, and probably are limited to not even doing based on the collective bargaining agreement with the NHLPA and things. Like, I'm not saying that what I'm saying is what they should be doing and how dare they. But I developed my own system with my own guidelines and my own rule book. And that's the principles I follow. I say, I would give this person 8 games where they only get 2 games or a fine in the real NHL. And like I said, I'm not saying the real NHL should give 8 games, but under my system where you've educated the players and you've called it to a certain standard, you're under the assumption that the NHL would call things as tightly as I want them in general. So the players would already have the message they shouldn't do that. Then you can go harder on. But
you're
of course,
suggesting consistency.
yes.
All right.
Yes,
We'll start there. Okay. There's one thing, and before we talk, some current events and some current hockey, you differentiate in how you view a hit, right, versus a charge versus a couple of these things. Maybe explain that
right.
to those listening in.
Well, without getting too much into it, basically Rule 48 for me has changed everything to the point where people only look at head contact. They say, oh, he didn't even catch the head. That's not a penalty. Or in other cases, it's a nice clean check. But then they say, oh, well, he hit the head. It should be a penalty. But to me, looking at the result, focusing on the result only, has completely taken us away from looking at what causes the problem in the first place, the technique, the approach, the purpose behind what people are doing. So to me, there's a difference between a hit and a check. A check is a hockey play, and sometimes the check doesn't even have contact. You're steering, guiding, angling, all the skills that we teach to deliver a check, all the way up through to Bantam before there's even contact hockey. All the things you're allowed to do that require you to be a good skater, a good positioner, that sort of thing. All the proper hockey things, and then eventually you advance to the contact. Whereas, as we all know, there's some players out there that just want to get a hit in. They don't care if the player's ready for it. They don't care if it makes sense in the context of the game. They just need to hit somebody. And with that mindset, when you go in, of course, when a player turns their back, you're going to hit them anyway. You're not prepared for it because you've already decided you're going to hit before the player's even done anything. So if you go in with a checking mindset where you're looking at the puck too and all that, then you're not necessarily automatically going to make contact unless it's there to be made. I really think we need to get back to the reason for why we even have hitting in hockey in the first place. I think we forget why sometimes,
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point, right? And also I think it goes beyond, right, just monitoring what the NHL is doing, but it has to start, at the level you're talking about, which is early on and those discussions. I know over the years, I mean, they've been trying to accommodate that. It seems it gets lost somewhere in the delivery. Like, where do you think that happens?
I think the problem is that people think there's such a big change when you get to Bantam and you're allowed to hit. In Canada, it's Bantam. I don't know what it is in the States, to be honest, but in Canada, it's Bantam. You're 13 years old. You're not allowed to check or make contact. It's always a penalty. No one's working on it because you're not allowed to do it. So when you get to the age where you're allowed to hit, all of a sudden it's like a completely different universe. So there's no holds barred. It's kill or be killed. And that's the mentality they go in with. Whereas really all the skills you need to do a proper body check are the fundamentals you should be taught right from the first time you learn how to skate. You should learn how to be able to turn properly. You should learn how to keep your stick on the ice and your head up. You should learn how to protect yourself, but you should also learn how to make proper contact with the purpose of separating your opponent from the puck, and that's it. So by the time you get to the age where you're allowed to make contact, you've already made contact enough times that it's not such a transgression that all of a sudden you get to go headhunting things. The mentality is behind hitting should be the same at the lower levels. So it's funny because a lot of people think, oh, you want hitting out of hockey, you want the contact to be gone. No, and in fact, I don't. And actually, I think there should be more of it at the younger levels. I just think that the difference between no hitting and hitting shouldn't be so astronomical. There should be similar amounts of contact with a little bit more advanced aggression as you get older, but it shouldn't be with the purpose of like a tactic to headhunt or injure or intimidate. That's where they lose me.
Yeah. No, I get that. That makes perfect sense. And I love your way of thinking. As I said, I've been following ToughCall Pod for a little while now, and I always, in fact, to the point, Josh, that when I see something that happens, I go right away to see what your take is on it. That's not to say I've always agreed, but for the most
Right.
part, I like to hear what you have to say and why. And so we're going to talk. Let's talk some current hockey, and of course we've got the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I feel as you know, and everybody feels is there's a different standard of officiating in the Stanley Cup for whatever reason when that happened. In fact, last night while I was watching the game, I began to wonder, like, has it always been like that? And to my recollection, it has been like that for as long as I can remember. So I guess the thought is why, and why do we allow it to persist? But as in terms of what's going on right now, right? We have a game last night that got a little bit out of hand in Tampa Bay and the Islanders, and you can expect when a game gets to that 4-0 plus what turns out to be 8-0 kind of game. And it happens in men's league, as you know, likely. It happens in any sport. It starts to get a little bit chippy. Barzal goes and cross-checks, who was it? I can't remember now who on Tampa, but cross-checks him more or less in the head, right? He did it once earlier on in the playoffs. So what's your thought on that? I mean, I think the first time he did it, you thought it should have been an automatic suspension. If not, I think you were quite harsh in what your thought process was on it.
Now, again, I want to be clear that I don't expect the real NHL to go as hard as I do. But in my NHL, cross-checking is a big one. Cross-checking has been a vendetta of mine. I think every month when I was writing a blog, I put out an article saying cross-checking is a problem. We need to solve it now. And I think I've done that for the last 4 or 5 years annually. It's just a problem. And for me, there's no real reason to cross-check anyone above the waist. Like, so people always say, oh, we tried to get him in the shoulder and it rode up into the face. And I'm thinking, well, why are you trying to hit anyone in the shoulder? That's not legal either. So if you happen to hit him in the face, that's your problem because you already tried to commit a penalty anyway. But in the real NHL, of course, you get 6 or 7 freebies to the shoulder, the neck, and whatever. And so, you see a guy like Barzal going at someone, and when you're allowed to cross-check the way they do, you expect someone coming at you to cross-check, so you instinctively put your stick up to protect yourself, and you give it back before the other player can get it, and suddenly you're the bad guy. But in this case, for Barzal, he was obviously the aggressor. He went way too far, hit him in the face. And people are going to say he dove. And I know people are saying that. He dove, he's faking, he's laying on the ice trying to draw a penalty. But if you don't cross-check someone in the face, they can't suck the referee into giving you a penalty for cross-checking someone in the face. That's where I'm at with this. You dug your own grave.
You know what? I couldn't agree more. And I guess the question that I have, right? Like that's right. If you're nowhere near his head, then there's no diving that's going to happen. But then here's the other part to that is, Friedman's on in the intermission shortly after that, and the commentary around, well, should he get a suspension? And he's right that given the history of suspensions in the playoffs so far this year, that's no more than a $5,000 fine. Right.
Yeah.
And here's and that in itself is the problem, right? Is that we have now set a standard, right? That you can go and for these guys, that's a freebie all day long, 5K.
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that you're fighting for the Stanley Cup, which in itself gives them a nice little bonus that would cover that 5K if they get there. Cross-check 1 or 2 guys in the head. It really doesn't matter, right? I mean, there's no, it's the consistency there, and we're going to talk about that too. But
the other thing I like to point out is all the time, as people, I think I'm kind of a stick in the mud, a snowflake or whatever, but that's only as the Department of Player Safety. As a player, I'm not saying I wouldn't do some of the things these players do. There's you just have to expect to get punished for it. That's what I'm saying. Is the penalty worth it in my mind to do it? And at $5,000 a pop, like you said, absolutely it is worth it. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, no, and you know what? This is their job. They're competitive individuals. Absolutely, 100% at $5,000 a pop. I think Bieksa said it best the other night. He said, like, they've been giving out hall passes all night. He said this in the Montreal Vegas game, right? He said they're giving out hall passes.
Yeah.
And so Weber took a hall pass that first, the first slash to who was it now? Jeez. But
Was that the incident with Nosa?
yeah, no sec, yeah. And after he takes the check behind from behind, then he gives him a little slash, and Bieksa says he gets a hall pass on that. He did get a hall pass until, of course, he pulled the helmet off, but it should never be allowed to get to that stage. So we're jumping ahead a little bit, but this is the standard that they've set and continue to set throughout the playoffs.
100%. And the one thing that bothers me though is, it all bothers me, of course, but if you get hit from behind, then you cross-check the player and there's no penalty. Then you give a slash, so that person slashes you back. Then sometimes they go back and call, okay, well, I'll give you a slash, but now all of a sudden the first slash is a penalty. But really, it's coincidental because you slashed him and you slashed him, so you both get one. But if he'd have called the first slash to begin with, I never would have retaliatory slashed anyway. So they should cancel each other out. Either the first one was a penalty or it isn't. So if it wasn't, then take the one guy only. Don't even it up. And I don't know. It just seems weird what they pick and choose or try and manage the game. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's the game management that that is the hard part. So we'll get on to officiating right away. Let's chat about the Islanders and Tampa Bay. Your thoughts so far on this series?
It's been pretty good hockey when they've been allowed to focus on the hockey. I think there's a couple of people on Twitter that always say, it's too bad we had such a great game and all we talk about is the officiating. Yeah. But as far as the series goes, I think Tampa is controlling the series in such a way that when they're on, they should beat the Islanders just like they did the other night. And then when they don't play well, the Islanders are just good enough and consistent enough, like robots. They play the same way. So if Tampa takes the night off, the Islanders are always going to capitalize on it. Whereas Tampa can turn it off and on as they please. So I think in some ways they control their own destiny, and they just have to make sure that they don't concede that by playing poorly. Ultimately, I think the series is going the way people expect it to. It's just what kind of wild card is going to be thrown in with some of the extra power plays and things like that are going to make a difference.
What's changed? I mean, in your mind, what's changed with Tampa? I mean, they've clearly turned a corner in terms of their ability to win in the playoffs. Whether they win this series or not, I mean, they are now a playoff team, and they're outstanding. Guys like Point, he's on a ridiculous run right now, eight games. It's just they've turned a point. I mean, is this the makings if they win the cup this year? Is this the makings of a dynasty type of team?
I think it is. I think we have to put away the idea of what a dynasty was even 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There's just so many good teams now that if you win a couple of cups in a row and get to the semifinals every year, you're doing something right. I would say you need to cheer for at least 3 or 4 teams because there's 31 teams. They're all good. Your team's not winning the cup. I don't care how much you want it to win. Now, some teams are, but we always say Tampa should win, but Vegas is good enough to win. Washington was still good enough to win. Toronto should be good enough. All these teams that are supposed to get a cup, if they all get them, then teams are going to be left out. So when you look at the body of work that Tampa has done, like you said, whether they win the series or not, they are a playoff hardened team. And for me, it all comes from the front office down. The culture they've created in that organization. I have a friend who works for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the premium seating department of all places, which was under the hot seat there earlier this year, but for their jersey rule. But anyway, the people that work in that organization are all there for the right reasons. They all have the right idea. They're all on board with the same concept. So you don't think about that. All the players have to do when they come is show up to the rink and play. And I was fortunate enough, thinking back now as an older person who played junior hockey, all I had to do was come to the rink and play. Whereas I know some players are worried about whether their team's going to even exist or whether they're going to have any fans in the stands or that sort of thing. Like when all you have to worry about as a player is playing hockey, your organization is doing something right. In Tampa, all the players are just all on the same page. The coach is all on the same page. Let's just do our jobs, let everyone else do their jobs, and we're going to make it work. Whereas if you look like a team like Buffalo, which has a great roster, if you take that roster and put it in Tampa, is it instantly a better team? If it's in an environment like Tampa has created, a culture, I think it is. And you didn't make any personnel changes. You just changed the attitude and the identity. And Tampa Bay, whatever they've done there is just exceptional. They're the pinnacle of what a team should shoot for right now, I think.
Yeah, it's it's interesting, right? I mean, you bring up something that I hadn't considered is if you change just the franchise behind the team that is the Buffalo Sabres, would that make a difference, right? And culture, whether you're in the corporate world or playing hockey, sometimes has such a big influence on how well you achieve whatever your goals and abilities are. So yeah, it's interesting. I can respect that idea, and obviously you have a little bit of insight, knowing somebody that works in the organization and how they operate. I think and people do, players commonly talk about the organization, each organization, and how they're run, and they've certainly got favorites in where they love to play, where they don't love to play. We focus a lot on the coaches and the GMs, but there's so much more that goes into that, from whether it's the arena, the ownership, how involved they are, all the training staff. There's so many bits and pieces right around the team that it certainly will make a big difference. I always think back to I can't remember the year, but the Habs had a couple of years where they were constantly fighting the injury bug, and so they went in and they fired all of the training staff and everybody, and those little things that we don't commonly think about, whether or not it made a big difference, I don't know, but it's there's something in the water, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Fans know, right? Yeah, so it's an interesting thought. So it's that's kind of neat to think about that in terms of the Tampa Bay organization. I get what you're saying about the dynasty. It's not the same as it used to be. I think as far as the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's a sore spot for me. This circumventing the cap by how much they did. I mean, I'm curious. I guess the only thing that would have made a difference is, in the regular season, right? Like the core group of these players was going to play for the Lightning at some point, right?
Yeah.
So, that look, that core is among the best that we've seen in a long time, and they're fun to watch. They're just so robotic in how they and how good they are, right? It's when you watch one of those fun movies, hockey movies or sports movies, and there's that big evil team that's just so damn good at everything they do. Right now, that's the Tampa Bay Lightning, and
That's funny. Yeah.
they're fun to watch. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. We got tonight, about 35 minutes from now, 10 o'clock for those of us in Atlantic Canada, 10:30 if you're in Newfoundland, is the Vegas Golden Knights and the Montreal Canadiens. Hell of a series so far. This kind of leads into that fourth topic, which is officiating. Let me ask you first, because, both you and I, we don't have a horse in this race, right? You're an Oilers fan.
Right.
I'm an Oilers fan. In a way, not. You know what? I'll just come out and say it. I've always said that when the Oilers are out, it's generally not about who I'm cheering for. It's about who I'm cheering against. Okay, and right now I am cheering against the Golden Knights, and I'm not, and it's not even that I don't dislike the Golden Knights. It's actually that we heard all year long how awful the North Division was. And so if our fourth seed team, Montreal Canadiens, go on to the Stanley Cup, which Lord help us if they win, because I don't want to. That's not something I want to. I want to participate in, because we'll never hear the end of it as Oilers fans, right? Every Habs friend that we have is going to remind us. They already do remind us about being the last Canadian team. So the I'm cheering for the Habs just to prove that the North Division could have cut it. In fact, I've got a tweet drafted and ready to send out that goes kind of like, I'm not even sure the Golden Knights could have made the playoffs in the North Division. Now, that's just trolling. Of course they could have. But I like. Do you have a team that you're rooting for, or are you just rooting for hockey? Good hockey.
I love hockey. I do. People think I hate the game and I want to ruin it, but I love the game. That's why I care what it states.
Yeah.
So I love watching. I watch way more hockey than someone who doesn't get paid to watch should watch ever. So my father-in-law is a huge Montreal Canadiens fan, and he passed that on to his son, my brother-in-law. And now they have a kid who's hard into it. So you would think my son is not an Oilers fan. I failed miserably there. I don't understand it. He's a Nashville fan. But so I have some Habs blood. I always worry about the Habs. I don't want them to be embarrassed. And of all the people left in the Stanley Cup, like I kind of was rooting for Carolina at points. I really want them to take the next step at some point. There's teams that I like. I wanted the Islanders to get this far. I really did. And now that they are, I'm kind of like over it. I kind of want them to stop. So the person that I really think deserves a Stanley Cup more than anyone else that's left in the race is Carey Price. So I feel like for different reasons, I am kind of rooting for the Habs. I was one of those people that thought the North Division was kind of different. It was unique, at least. I won't say whether it's better or worse. I just didn't know how the North Division would stack up against the style of teams in the other divisions, the speed they play at. But with the officiating the way it is, I'm not saying that it's a huge advantage to Montreal. In fact, I think actually it worked out in this series to not be such a huge advantage for them. But it has changed the way teams have had to play. So it's kind of benefited a team like Montreal, who is sort of somehow looking like a playoff hardened team, even though they don't really have a lot of playoff success under their belts. They're just kind of geared towards that style of play, I suppose. And it's kind of working out for them.
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? Because I'm trying to put my finger on what's changed with Montreal versus the regular season. Obviously, they've got Carey Price back. That's huge. Shea Weber was more or less injured. The style of play, I think, playoffs suit a guy like Deneau more than they might suit other players, right? Like, he kind of plays that well. He played a great, first round. In fact, he's been, a thorn in the side of many of the teams so far.
Yes.
But I'm trying to kind of put in my head, right? Like figure out how they're different, right? Like how they've come to do what they're doing, and they just seem to be putting it all together at the right time. Do you think though that they have what it takes to get past Vegas? Like that, I think last game is a heartbreaker for them because I felt like they outplayed Vegas 90% of the game and come out with the loss. And also, and we're going to get into this, I felt like the officiating has been a little bit skewed towards Montreal, and I try to, look at that not with my North Division glasses on right now, but it just, I get a kick out of the New York Saints, like that comment. But I'm thinking of the Vegas Saints right now, right? Like they, I cannot for the life of me, I agree officials should not manage the game, but there's no team that I have ever watched in my life of watching hockey that could get through a whole game without taking a single penalty, especially at this level, right? Where the guys are this good, and you've played junior hockey, right? Like, you are going to hook, or you're going to hold, or you're going to do something because you're going to try to stop a goal from happening, or you're going to try something.
Yeah.
And for a team to get through one game and almost really a whole series without and play the way Vegas plays, we're going to talk about that. But anyway, my first question is: do you think they can get by Vegas? You think Montreal can get by Vegas?
I think they can. I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas won. I'm not saying that, but I also wouldn't be that surprised if Montreal won. The thing that I thought might hold them back is getting enough goals. I'm very pleased to see that. It's not all Carey Price. Carey Price is playing exceptionally well. Don't get me wrong. But you can't say that the only reason they got that far is because they're riding a hot goaltender. And I really respect the heck out of that. They're getting contributions from different people at different times. And I suppose, when you look at the Leafs, they got these veterans. They got Foligno. They picked up these players that were supposed to help them along the way. And did they or didn't they? I'm not going to sit here and debate that. I'm just going to focus on Montreal. They're doing well. You got Stahl and you got Perry, and you look at the only difference between the players the Leafs picked up and the players the Canadiens picked up are all the Canadiens players have won Stanley Cups, and the ones that the Maple Leafs picked up have not. And I'm not a big believer in wasting a roster spot just for the older, influencer, that guy in the room. I think they still have to be able to play, but boy, are those guys playing too. And that's like the depth that they acquired is coming through in spades for them, more so than probably they even expected. Honestly, I got people all of a sudden, Corey Perry was people's favorite player when he was the most hated guy, like even 2 years ago.
I still hate the guy, but man, Corey Perry is kind of, he's public enemy number one in oil country, right? But man,
for sure.
I always think to myself, and I've said it, on the pod, I feel like a million times, the guys I hate the most are the guys I want on my team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Corey Perry is right up there. The only exception to that rule might be Kessler. I probably wouldn't have Kessler on my team at any given time. But Corey Perry, that guy, I don't know what to say about him. He provides a presence to every team. Him coming out, you talk about culture on a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like him getting sticked in the face, and we're gonna keep going back to this officiating topic today. And I know we're not trying to ruin the game for anybody, but the fact that he goes out, gets stitched up, and comes back, right, to be high-fiving everybody at the bench, and he looked like shit, right? Like he's he's hurting, and but man, like a real veteran, really good at what he does. Always like, it doesn't matter where he's playing in the lineup, right? From the first line to the fourth line, you hear him, like he's been in the game, right? He's part of the game, and he's always mixing it up, and he's doing things, and he does play on the line sometimes. But I actually think, when I say that, I think he's one of those guys that plays on the line that doesn't go over as often as you might think, right? Like, he just plays a really hard game, right? I
Yes.
play against him.
Yeah, I've had it in for him since he beat Sidney Crosby in the Memorial, whatever the CHL championship is. I can't believe I can't remember the name of that trophy. Anyway, Cup, yeah, and he ever since then, I've been following both of those players' careers quite heavily, and I tell you, I really respect where Corey Perry's ended up, and it was the stuff of legends when he came back and started high-fiving people and all. And, he gets strict like that. I mean, his first thought isn't, ow, my face, and what am I going to do? His thought is, come on, man, give our team a power play. Like,
exactly, yeah.
if I'm going to look like this, let it be for a reason. Here, come on.
Yeah. Oh man, and that that was just awful. I don't know what more to say about that. Okay, let's talk about officiating in this series because I've been sort of dancing around it.
Yeah.
First off, do you feel it's skewed one way? And I don't say that meaning like I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I don't think Gary Bettman made a call and told the officials. But I've always felt certain teams get away with more calls, and I've never been able to figure it out. But there's got to be something to it, right? Like there's got to be, and I'm sure at times it's been the Oilers, right? I don't want to say that it's but it feels like certain teams play a style of play that the officials just seem to let them get away with. And other teams, when they retaliate, or they and here's to your one of your points, right? The retaliation shouldn't be necessary, but when they retaliate, that's the team that ends up getting the call. So it's a kind of a two-parter, right? What is your thought on the officiating? Has it been one-sided? Well, just give me your lowdown on this because there's a lot to unpack here. But what's your thought?
It's hard to contain it to a thread of topics because you do tend to get dragged down some sort of rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist in terms of the league pushing for a certain team to win or not. I agree with you there. But Vegas did get away with an awful lot against Colorado as well. That series was going Colorado's way. Next thing you know, games 5 through 7, they didn't take many penalties at all. And so here they are against Montreal. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there is something to the Chris Lee vendetta against the Montreal Canadiens. A particular official seems to do a lot of Canadian games, and when he does them, they seem to not go the Canadiens' way. And from what I understand, he is not officiating tonight's game. So I'm very curious to see how that goes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like to point fingers or name names, but there's just a history there that it's, I'm not going to tell you that's what it is. I'm just saying it's curious enough that somebody might want to look into it and just
yeah.
Open some doors. I'm not going to go open some doors, but I'd like to see them open maybe and find out some things.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, right?
Yeah.
Have a look. There's officials that every team has a hate for, right? And I'm all right hating an official as long as they're calling an even game. I think you're 100% right. I think look, there's the human factor to officiating. Just like, as much as a fan, well, it's the same reason why they would never have a Canadian official officiating Canada U.S. Gold medal game, right?
Right. Yeah.
Same reason, because the worry or and maybe some of it's perceived bias, whatever it is, there is the thought that they could be biased, and I believe they could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like if Chris Lee has a bias that has become noticeable over time, which it sure as hell seems that way, right? You need to get them, remove them from that situation. Put in somebody else. The league has a lot of officials. I know there's some challenges with probably quarantining among other things, and COVID creates all sorts of new challenges. But look, this is I'll keep saying it. I don't know a team in the NHL that could ever go a full game without one penalty, right?
Especially at that level, like you said, with the stakes that high, you're going to do. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. They say.
That's exactly it, right?
And the Canadians are good enough that they've put those players into a position where they've had to do things that are. I mean, it's not like we're making this up. Like people watch the game, they've seen things that are penalties and things that have been called in other games. It's not like we're just inventing incidents. They're there. You see them, right? So why aren't they being called? I don't know.
That you know what? That's 100% the thing. That's what it boils down to. Is they watch other games. They know the other piece to this, and this kind of goes. And this is probably why I totally agree with you. I don't think you're trying to ruin the game. I think you're trying to get to a point that we'd all like as fans, especially Oilers fans. I think because we've got a pretty special player in Connor McDavid, and in
Yeah.
fact, I mean, you could go back to Wayne Gretzky. He put up with the very same thing, and we screamed then, and that's why I kind of feel a little bit hopeless that we'll ever get it changed. In fact, it was worse then, I think, in some ways. But I do think the enforcer rule had a little bit of a change, change to that. Anyway, point being is that everybody says, well, that people be in the box the whole time. You know what? They won't be because the players will adjust, right?
100%.
Players will adjust.
I love when people say, well, if I give a suspension, or I was like, well, what about that hit? And I'm like, yeah, got that one too. Like you got to call them all. And there was the thing about the cross check, like with Barzal last night, and I put out a tweet. I can't remember exactly how it went, but because people are saying, well, he dove, and so they're all on board. Oh yeah, it sounds reasonable. Get rid of all cross checks. I like what you're saying there. Oh, but not that one because he dove. Oh, but not that one. That one though, really, there wasn't much force there. Oh, that one, the guy turned his back, and it's like, okay, like stop making excuses. Either you want them all called or you don't. It's still a cross check. Like you have to call a penalty. There was that one cross check by McNabb to the back of Lankinen, and they're all like, oh, Lankinen turned his back. Well, okay, but if he'd have done that to his front, it still would have been a penalty. Like, so the turning didn't really have any bearing on whether or not it's a cross check. So, like, you just call them all, and like you said, they'll stop doing it. And if they don't, they deserve to be in the box anyway because they shouldn't be able to gain an advantage illegally. So if you end up in a power play all game, that is what it is.
A good example, for instance, is and maybe it's not a great example, but it's still an example. You can play men's hockey at a competitive level without hitting, right?
Yeah.
And I've played against guys that have played in the NHL at senior level hockey. I've played against guys that have played in junior that were used to a game where you could hit. They get out there and they still play a competitive game. They play a hard game. Don't get me wrong, right? Like they take every inch that they can get, but they don't full on like blow somebody up middle of the ice ever, right? In fact, they are so good, and you know this, Josh, because you've played high-level hockey. You know that if you're playing, it's easier to play high-level hockey and not get hurt in the men's levels because guys know they can control themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they can damn well at the NHL level control themselves enough to know, right? Like, you get high stick less, you play higher levels, you get high stick less. Right, you don't get high stick more. You get high stick less, and it's because guys can control themselves. And we're talking, a level that's 4 or 5 levels below NHL, and guys can control themselves. They sure as hell can control themselves in the NHL, and you just need to start calling that, and it will happen over time. And in fact, it'll happen quickly, right? When you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl getting 10 power plays in the first game of the season, you can damn well guarantee that guys aren't going to be doing that, right? Like they're not going to want, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the power play 10 times the next game. So adjust.
Look at the standard for holding. This is a penalty in some cases.
Yeah.
That's the standard for holding.
Yeah.
Cross-check a guy in the face. Oh, well, he got you earlier, so no problem. Oh, you're in front of the net? Oh, that's just a battle. Front of the net. You can do anything you want in front of the net. That's no problem. Oh, but if you grab the stick, holding the stick. Like, I mean, come on. We when we play gentlemen's hockey, I mean, it's not physical. It's definitely still physical, But for me, the ones that always get me are the ones where you actually go over top of the puck to finish a check on a guy. It's like the puck is right at your feet. You can skate away with it, but you actually avoid it to make your hit. And then we say, well, like you said, these are the best players in the world. So why are the people who are their job is to hit people, and they play in the best league in the world, and if they hit so much, they have like 300 hits, they should be the best at hitting, right? But they're always so bad at it. I don't get it. So, we always say, oh, well, if he'd have wanted to hurt him, he could.
The best, though. They are the best at hitting, right? They are the best at all this. They have the control to do it.
They are. You're 100% right. They can control it, and we should demand it and expect it of them.
Yeah. It's, it is funny. I do get, I understand there's some level that there's a concern, right, that if you start to change these things, that you'll change the outlook of the game. And the reality is, though, is that the players, like everybody else, they know that they can hook and hold in the preseason, and it'll make for an ugly preseason. But by the time the regular season comes along, that changes. And then by the time the playoffs come along, that changes, right? So it's like in as a player, you know that. If you don't know that, you haven't been paying attention, right? Because it's been that way since you and I started watching hockey, that there are, three standards. There's preseason, where they test things out, like they pretend like they're going to be calling hooks and holds all year long. And then that changes once the regular season starts. Well, usually they give it about 3 games, right? And the players know that, right? They have to know that. As I said, they're not paying attention if they don't. And then come Stanley Cup playoffs, they know again. The thing that bugs me the most is players have admittedly come out and said, we will hook and hold Connor McDavid because that's the only way we know how, right, to stop him.
What can you do?
They don't call it. Like there's an admission of guilt.
Yeah.
and yet there's still no call. I don't want to get onto the whole Connor McDavid thing too much, but it's, for us Oilers fans, of course, that's near and dear to our heart, and we can get and understand.
He's not a good example because he can do things right now. He can score the kind of goal that no one else in the league, the world, has ever scored before, because of his speed and what he can do with the puck at speed. And of course, in a 60-minute game where he plays a lot of those minutes, he is going to eventually get free. And you are going to have to do something illegal to him. And fine, if you don't want to let him go through, that's great. But you should expect to be called for it. Like, it's not a crime to have to hold. Just tell someone, McDavid beat me, so I had to grab a hold of him. There's no, you're not losing any pride there. He is what he is. He's awesome.
Well, and you said something that everybody's heard before. It's a good penalty to take, right?
Right.
So you take the penalty, but you're going to take the penalty, right?
Yeah.
So you take it. You don't hold them and expect to get away with it. You hold them and expect to go, do your 2 minutes of shame and get out and hope that your PK comes through for you. But it's just not the standard that they're allowing. All right, let's move into the final topic. We got 10 minutes before game time. I guess puck drops usually about 10 minutes after, so we probably got 20, but we'll shut her down in about 10. First, I want to say thank you for joining me. This is the first back to live streaming for Oilers Live, and I think I got most of the kinks out early, and then I'll release this as a podcast for people to listen to on audio. It's on my YouTube, so go to youtube.ca/OilersLive. It's I don't think the Twitch stream actually worked, but I don't have a lot of followers on Twitch, so it's not a big deal if it did. If it didn't, it's also on Facebook. You go to facebook.com/OilersPodcast, and you'll find it there. And then right here on Twitter at Oilers Live, so you can stream it in a number of different areas. And of course, it'll be on Spotify and anywhere you get podcasts, it'll be there. So thank you for joining me back for the Oilers live stream. We're going to move into something I'm going to do every Tuesday, which is C's and C's, comments and criticisms. Now, you had one that, for those of us on the East Coast, that we most of us, and there's actually quite a few Oilers fans out here in Halifax. As you probably know, the Oilers once had their farm team here in Halifax, and then moved to Cape Breton. And in fact, you can still get
Yep.
Cape Breton Oilers shirts at one of the local stores there. For the life of me, I cannot find a Nova Scotia Oilers, a Nova Scotia Oilers jersey. But if you come across one, I'm willing to spend just about just about as much as I need to get one. But
Yes.
they are quite rare. Bookburger was quite popular at that time. Anyway, what was my original point? Season Cs. So one of the things you brought up before we got on the air was NHL, the Game Center app.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a hard man to please, but the so first of all, you talk about the scheduling and how, if it says puck drop is at 9, it's 9:10 or 10:10. Like, how hard is it to start on time? First of all, how hard is it to stagger your game times so that you can watch multiple games? Someone like me wants to watch every game. Like,
don't get me started on that one. Yeah.
But that's not even my big vendetta. I'm sorry. I watch, like you said, we're all on the East Coast. We're Oilers fans. We're not staying up to watch every one of those games. We'll watch it later, the next day, or whatever. So, luckily we pay for the app. We can watch it anytime we want. That's the beauty of it. But what drives me crazy is, I'll have watched some of the game usually, I'll want to fast forward to where it was. And when I do, the time bar comes on the bottom. And if it's a close game, if the time bar says 4 hours and 37 minutes, I know the game's gone to overtime. So it's like I already kind of have the game ruined, even though I haven't even watched it yet. And the whole point was to watch it live. And if it's a 2 hour and 47-minute thing, well, I know if the Oilers are down by 1, well, they better get 2 goals in a hurry, or I know the game's over. So it's like, and then even if I know it goes to overtime, I also know that it goes to double overtime or close to it. So there's no point watching single overtime. You're not getting the excitement out of the chances, you see. So, because that no one scores till late. So if they could the way to solve that is, I think, to make the time bar. My brother thought of this idea because he's in South Korea. He doesn't watch any games live. They're always in the morning.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So if you had that time bar and you set it to some ridiculous amount of time, like 6 or 7 hours or something crazy, that it's like that every game, even if the game's only 2 hours or 2.5 hours long, then you don't know. When you look at that, you can't tell right away because all the games are like that, how long it's been. You can still enjoy, not know the outcome. That's one thing where, especially in this day and age where I know a lot of people consume the games that way, especially where I want to watch every game. I do. I try and watch as much as possible because I'm trying to cover the whole league. So I'm not, when all the games start at 8:00 at the same time and they're all in intermission at the same time, it's hard to watch all the games unless I watch them over the course of several days. And so that comes up for me a lot. And it would be a nice feature for them to change because I got all the scores hidden and all that, but then it still gets spoiled because of that time bar.
Yeah, have you ever tried to call for support, by the way? Anyway, let me just save you some time because don't do it. Well, they actually don't support the Game Center app. They don't support NHL Live. It's one of those things where, if you lived on the border and they didn't know which side of the border you lived on, that's how they treat you. So because because in Canada it's done through Rogers, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually an NHL owned entity. They kind of you deal with Rogers as your first call, but their whole job is to tell you to turn it on and turn it off again. And if that doesn't work, you're out of luck. There's really no escalation path, and there's nobody you could call if you wanted to. But for a certain period of this season, I was resorting to having to find alternate ways to watch Oilers hockey when it wasn't available locally,
Right.
And which is a shame because I pay for NHL Live and couldn't watch it. And to me, that type of inconsistency and ridiculousness, is what drives people to illegal pirating, and this, absolutely poor blackout idea that they have in the NHL. It just feels, to use a good term, a little bush league for a pro sport, right? That
Oh, for sure. I mean, why are they blacking out games in a pandemic? No one is going to the
I
rinks.
know.
Like now it's different, but come on. Like, you want to grow the game? Let's grow the game.
And it's crazy, right? Yeah, I won't get that, and it was probably one of the single sore spots. But having said that, they should never be blacking out games anyway, right? I mean, what they, it's economics 101, right? Like you start, throwing tariffs on stuff, it doesn't help, right? Like you think it's going to help, but it really doesn't. It has the alternate effect, right? Which is to, create inefficiencies, right? And the same thing goes for the NHL. Is you start blacking things out and you stop people from watching the game that would otherwise watch the game, buy merchandise, buy different things, right? Have a chance to immerse themselves in the game of hockey, right?
Yeah.
And you have the alternate effect. You have folks that, right, turn away from the sport who would have otherwise been real fans. And I just don't get it. I understand the advertising, but the NFL seems to do fine, and they don't, to my knowledge, they don't have any blackouts. I don't think they do. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like if I could watch any NFL game at any given time on a Sunday, right? And to your point, they stagger them. They do all of these things. There's a reason they're as successful as they are, and it's about time the NHL, takes a step and looks at that, league as being the standard by which they go after, right?
Yes. I mean, something as simple as TSN too, right? I get 5 TSN stations and they all show the same game. Like, what is the point of that? Let me see some different teams here. Expose me to something.
It is unbelievable, right? Yeah, that we have all of these sports channels now. Anyway, we're at the bottom of the hour. 10 o'clock, Josh. You know what? I've been wanting to rant about NHL Live forever. We really didn't have enough time because I could probably spend a whole episode on the on how much I hate that service, and yet how much I need it as an Oilers fan,
Right.
and a guy, living in Atlantic Canada. Again, thank you for joining me today. For those of you that watched today or are going to listen to the podcast, you can follow Josh at ToughCall Pod, and then follow his new Twitter account as well. It's at NHL Call. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as I mentioned before, he's a terrific guy to follow. He's got different insights. I don't think he cares whether you agree with them or not. I think he wants you to, have some interaction and discussion, like most good folks on Twitter do. You really, I think that we could all benefit from what it is you're trying to do. For our enjoyment of the game. For sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I do appreciate that. And thanks for coming on with the Oilers live stream. Join me here next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Mountain. I've got Jared Brown. He is the head scout at Draft Pro Hockey. So they have just released their 2021 Draft Prospects Guide, of which I've got a copy, and I'm going to peruse this upcoming week. The following week, I'm going to have Sean Patrick Ryan at SPR, the Oil Night, for another Prospects episode. We're in that season. There's no Oilers hockey. We'll sprinkle in a little bit of Stanley Cup talk, and maybe time and again I'll be referring to ToughCall here. Yeah, hopefully not too much. Let's hopefully everybody keeps it clean. So thanks again, everybody, for joining me tonight, and hope you enjoy the game tonight. We'll see you next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Mountain. Have a great night.